Section 11.2 is finding surface areas of prisms and cylinders. So a prism, by definition, says it's a polyhedron with two congruent parallel faces that we call the bases. So if you look at this shape here, that would be a prism because you have all of the lateral faces end up being rectangular, and then the bottom and the top is what you call your bases. And so that would be, looks like maybe a square. There's different kinds of prisms, so it just depends on what kind of base they have. So this would be called a triangular prism because notice again, all of the lateral faces are rectangles, and then the top and the bottom, the bases, end up being triangles. A cube is also considered to be a prism even though it has all 6 sides being squares. So again, we're going to find surface area, and so that means we're going to find all of the areas of the faces and add them all up. So your book will have you find lateral area, which just means that you're going to end up finding all of the sides and not the top and the bottom, not the two bases. So if you would, like, all of these sides is what you would find for lateral area. But we're just going to focus on doing surface area, which is the lateral area formula plus 2 times the area of the base. So you're going to want to write down this formula because the book makes it somewhat difficult for you to understand both of them. So just make sure that you write down that you're going to do the perimeter of the base times the height of the prism plus 2 times area of the base. Okay, so notice we're using capital B for that because you have to do area of the base. So let's take a look at an example. So on your first example, notice that you have a triangular prism, and it's asking us to find the surface area. So the first thing is knowing your formula, so I'm going to do the formula we just discussed. I'm going to need perimeter of my base. So my base is a triangle, and I know that one side's 3, another side's 4, but I don't know that third side. So since there are no angles inside of there, I am going to use Pythagorean theorem to find what that third side ends up being. So I'm going to end up finding the hypotenuse, so I'm putting 3 and 4 in for A and B, and then when I solve it, I end up getting 5. So now for my perimeter of my base, I can just add up those sides. So notice I'm adding 3, 4, and 5 together, and I get 12 for the perimeter. The H stands for the height of the prism, and so this would be 6. They show it to you in the picture. Then I'm going to do 2 times area of the base, capital B. So area of my base. So this formula will change depending on what shape your base is. So the first thing you have to do is identify what shape this is. So since this is a triangle, I'm doing the area formula for a triangle. And that says I do the half times the base of the triangle times the height of the triangle. So that's why we're doing half times 3 times 4, because the height and the base are the ones that are formed with your right angle. So do not use the hypotenuse. Now since I have all those pieces, I can just fill them into my formula. So my perimeter times the height of the prism plus 2 times area of the base, and then I solve that out and I end up getting 84 for my surface area. Okay, again, since it's area, you're going to leave your label as a squared because you're just finding all of the area of the faces. You're going to pause the video and try the got it question. So in the got it question, we are trying to step it out. So they're going to have you do this in pieces where you find the lateral area and then the area of the base, and then we can just add those together to find the surface area. So my lateral area, it said that that's going to be when you do the perimeter of the base times the height of the prism. So notice that this changed from we did triangular prism on the last one. This is now a hexagonal prism since my base is a hexagon, okay? So I'm going to find perimeter of my base. So remember, perimeter is distance all the way around, and since this is a regular hexagon, I know all of these will be 6. So I'm going to do 6 times 6, which is why we get 36 for our perimeter. And then the height of the prism it shows me is 12. Now remember, your two bases are, if you were to stand it up, it would be the two shapes that would be identical to each other. So make sure you're using those two. So for our lateral area, we ended up getting 432. Then the next question asked me to find the area of the base. Now it says to do in simplest radical form. We're not going to do that, so you're welcome to cross that part out. We're just going to find it like we normally did. So we had a hexagon, and so since it's a regular hexagon, we're doing a half times apothem times perimeter. So I need to find my apothem. So I was splitting this into 6 sections, and then I drew in my apothem, and then I kind of blew up my triangle so you could see it a little bit better. So remember, we do 360 divided by 6, and then it splits that angle in half, so that's why this top angle ends up being 30. And then my apothem also splits my side length, which is why I have a 3 down here. Now I'm going to figure out if I'm going to use sine, cosine, or tangent. Since I have the opposite and adjacent side, I'm going to end up using tangent. So I set up my equation. Tangent of 30 equals the opposite over the adjacent. So when it's set up like this, I have to multiply by a and then divide by the tangent. So that's why we're going to do 3 divided by tangent of 30, and we get the apothem to be 5.2. So then I have my apothem. I plug that in. Perimeter of that is still going to be 36, so I plug that in, and so the area of my base is going to be 93.6 meters squared. So then the last question is saying find the surface area. So remember, the surface area was this whole formula. Well, we already found P times H. That was up here in letter A, so we're just going to plug in 432. And then we're going to do 2 times the area of the base. And we already found area of the base. It was 93.6. So I just need to put that into my calculator, and I end up getting 619.2. Then it asked me to round to a whole number, so that's why we rounded it to 619 meters squared. So typically what happens is we're not going to step it out through this. The book likes for you to do that. We're just going to jump right into here. Okay, so this is your main formula that you're going to want to use for prisms. Alright, so now we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about cylinders. So it's giving you some pictures of cylinders. Since it's a cylinder, think of like a can of soup. That's a cylinder. The top and the bottom, those bases, are now always going to be circles. Okay, so a prism sometimes can be more difficult to do because the base changes every time. But for a cylinder, it's going to stay a circle, so it makes it a little bit easier. Some vocab, just making sure you understand. It gives it an altitude of a cylinder is perpendicular segment that joins the planes, and then the height is going to be the length of that altitude. So you're always wanting to make sure that you have a perpendicular height, and that's going to be what you use. So our formula, again, the book really makes it somewhat difficult writing in all of these extra pieces with lateral area. I highlighted the one that you're going to use. So for surface area, we're going to do 2 times pi times the radius times the height of the prism plus 2 times pi times the radius squared. Okay, it's essentially the same formula that you actually use for prism. It's just dedicated more to circles. Okay, so that's why it's changed into pi. So, first question, it says the radius of the base of a cylinder is 4 inches and its height is 6 inches. What's the surface area of the cylinder? And we're going to leave our answer in terms of pi. So if you remember, that means we will not get any decimals in doing this. Okay, it should only be whole numbers, and then pi should be in our answer. So again, here's my formula that I'm going to use for a cylinder. It tells me that my radius is 4, so I plug that in. It also tells me my height is 6. So I'm just plugging in the appropriate spots. Now, when you are doing it in terms of pi, you're multiplying the whole numbers but not pi on your calculator. So I do 2 times 4 times 6 and I get 48. And then I do 2 times 4 squared and I get 32. I am going to just add 48 and 32 and I get 80. And I'm going to leave the pi in my answer when I write it. I'm not going to put it on my calculator. So no decimals when it says in terms of pi. Okay? So think of it as like a variable like x. So I want you to pause the video and try the got it question. So in the got it question, here is your formula you should be using. It tells you that the radius is 10 and the height is 9, so I plugged those in their appropriate spots. Make sure you're multiplying 2, 10, and 9, so you get 180 pi. This one over here, you should get 200 pi, and then when you add them, you get 380 pi centimeters squared. So this section is dedicated for you to find surface area of prisms and cylinders. And like I said, prisms can be somewhat difficult just because the base will change. So you really have to apply what shape is the base and then use that appropriate formula.